All right, so welcome back to the channel. Thank you. Today I got a very special guest. We don't know too much about each other, which makes it even better because, you know, sometimes you don't know somebody and you get to know them in the moment. Powerful things happen. So, but I know for sure she has an inspirational story, has a amazing recovery life and a message out there. So, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Glynis. Really happy to be here. Rainy day.
Yeah. Glynis, tell me about that name, Glynis. Where'd that come from?
Glynis is Welsh.
Okay.
I'm not Welsh.
Yeah, okay.
My parents just like the name. I think I was named after an actress from some old movie. She was in Mary Poppins. This is a woman named Glynis Johns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So let's talk about your childhood a little bit. You can start wherever you want to start, but the key thing is those impact events in your life that just you remember stick out to you that alter the trajectory of your life. Just tell me a little bit about that.
I think probably one of the first things that came to mind is when I was about 11 or 12, my mom ended up leaving, and during that period of time, her and I weren't getting along. I was a preteen, going through puberty, all of that fun stuff, a lot of hormones and emotions, and she was going through some stuff, things that I don't think I was aware of at that time, but she left for work one day and she didn't come home. Then she sent a letter in the mail. So my dad went on to raise my sister and I, and I think I was already just going through a lot of big transitions as a young girl, and when she left, it felt like she left because she didn't love me. Which I don't think was true in hindsight, but that's how it felt at the time. Yeah.
So when she left, do you remember how you felt when that happened?
Yeah, I remember leading up to that point, her and I were butting heads quite a bit. We weren't getting along. We were fighting. There was a lot of chaos. But I remember still being surprised when she did leave. Her and my dad weren't getting along either. And when she left, it was it was this terrible feeling of rejection and abandonment, that I was not enough for her to stay.
Yeah. And how did your dad handle it?
Oh yeah, my dad was terribly depressed and sad for years.
But he stepped up to the plate, took care of.
Yeah. I think what happened was, so my dad, both of my parents were a little bit older than some parents. So my mom, at the time when she left, was going through menopause. And so she was having a lot of big changes as well, that I didn't understand at the time. And my dad was in his 60s, late 50s, early 60s, so he had retired. He had been a postman.
Yeah.
He was a veteran, and when she left, he ended up having to go back to work full time. And he was working overnight graveyard shifts. So he was sleeping during the day and he was working at night in order to, financially support my sister and I.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now, did you ever get a chance to ask your mom why she left? Did you ever talk to her after that?
Yeah, so we did talk. I was really, really angry with her for a very, very long time. When she left, not only did I just kind of go off the deep end and start running away, and I started drinking and smoking weed, and I was hanging out with older boys and acting out promiscuously, but my dad also, I think, felt very guilty and responsible for what was happening with me. So he wasn't like really putting any restrictions on me. And he felt like it was his fault, you know? So I remember being, I didn't have any oversight, so I was just doing what I wanted.
Yeah. So that kind of led you, like how you said, drinking, smoking. Like, at what age did you start to do that?
Just around that age. I think I had started a little bit previous to my mom leaving, and I think for a long time I used her leaving as an excuse for all of my own shortcomings.
Yeah.
For a very long time. But the truth is I was already kind of like dipping my toe in the water before she left.
Yeah.
It just, I was able to do it without any reservations when she did, because I didn't have any, like, I didn't have very much oversight. And I know you had asked about her and I talking. We did talk a little bit, but for the next like 12 or 13 years, it was like very minimal. I didn't want to talk to her.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's understandable.
Yeah.
So, very understandable. So, when was the first time that you used drugs or alcohol? Like, who introduced you to that? How did you, that first time? You remember that?
So the very first time I ever used drugs or alcohol, I was like 8. But I didn't become like a daily drinker at that point. But at 8, my mom was sober. So my mom got sober before I was born. She was in recovery from alcoholism. So I never saw my mom drink. And my dad was very much the type of person who would have like a glass of wine every 6 months. So there wasn't really any drinking in my house, very minimal. And we had gone camping, and my dad had a little bit of wine, and he let me have a sip. And there was a box of it, and I remember he didn't know he was grilling and stuff like that. And I went back for more, and then I remember running around with kids and playing and falling over, and then standing up and then falling over.
Hey, that's crazy how like you remember that like so vividly, those moments.
Mm-hmm.
But it's crazy because those moments kind of like are like major points in our life. They like set us on a direction, you know. So I mean, you started using more, right? And so when did it get to the point where it just started to get really out of control? At what age?
So it was starting to get a little hectic when my mom was still home, but it was probably at about 12 years old, like when she left, where I started drinking most nights. I was going out and nobody was there to stop me. My dad was working at 11 to 7. I would have parties when he would leave at 10:30. I would have everybody show up at 10:45. I was smoking pot. I was starting to do like ecstasy and stuff like that, and cocaine. And things progressed really quickly after that point. And at 14, I think, I got a DUI. I didn't even have a permit. And I started to have like the courts and like the institutions and that kind of.
Geez, so you I mean, that's young. When you think about, like, looking back 12, 13, 14, you're getting a DUI. Wow, like, okay, so when did you first start, like, getting into major trouble, like going in, like, juvenile or?
Yeah. So at 14, when I got that first DUI, they released me to my parents. But I was put on probation. And when I was put on probation, I was put on drug tests, and I had to show up, and I was required to go to like an outpatient program. And between the years of when I got that first DUI, it was probably even just a few months, I had started using heavier drugs. I was using opiates, and I was using, freebase cocaine. I was smoking it, and this was out in Massachusetts, so there wasn't really any meth out there at that time. And so I was using really heavy drugs, and it had progressed to a point where I believed that I was doing it because I liked it. But I think the truth is I had no control over it. Like, I had to do it,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really my decision. It was like, it had gotten to a point where I couldn't stop even if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Like, the most powerful reason to stop wasn't enough, which was like facing going into juvenile detention, and I failed drug tests for some pretty heavy duty drugs when I was really young, and so my first stint in like a detox facility was at 14. They let me out again, and then I used again, and then I was committed to the state of Massachusetts until I was 18. Yeah.
So when you say committed, like, what is that for people that don't know?
Yeah, so we're in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, I think they call it YA. In Massachusetts, they call it the Department of Youth Services. They probably call it many other things in many other states, but essentially it means I'm no longer on probation where I have the opportunity to get off. I'm essentially like a ward of the state, like in the state's custody until I'm 18 years old. And there's a couple different ways that can happen. Sometimes it's like child services coming in. That wasn't true for me because I didn't necessarily have an unsafe home. For me, it was criminal stuff. So rather than child services, it was this like entity in Massachusetts that when you're a teenage criminal, they essentially it's their way of kind of taking you into their care and trying to like correct that behavior and giving you services that might not have been available. But I saw it as like a death sentence at the time.
Yeah, definitely. And like they wouldn't let your dad, take over or anything.
No, part of that process when you're in Massachusetts, when you're committed, you have to go to juvie and you have to go for a certain period of time. So I went to juvenile detention or Department of Youth Services for a little less than 2 years. And then I got out and I was put directly into like an all-girls like group home, specifically geared towards like substance use disorder and addiction. And so that was like my first like rehab experience. Yeah.
So, because I know like in California, like you said, YA Youth Authority, when you're just a juvenile delinquent, you basically get to the point where probation, that's it, we're done with that, you're just too much. So, but so much has to lead up to that. Like you got to keep getting caught and just get caught up and stuff like that. So I know you started using drugs and you got the DUI, but what else happened for them to say, no, you know what? Now you're basically, like you said, essentially property of the state. Now we're gonna control you to your 18. What was some significant things that happened?
So there was the DUI. I failed a drug test for heroin at 14. Then I had court, and I was scared they were going to commit me. And looking back now, they may or may not have, I don't know, but I do believe that the reason that they would have at that time is because there weren't that many resources available to me with my health insurance. And if they committed me to the state, I would have been able to go to the treatment programs and the detox facilities. I ended up going to a detox, but my insurance wouldn't cover it, so I got out. And I used again, so this is like the second or third failed drug test for opiates or cocaine. And then I was scared to go to my court date, so I ran away. I was on the run for a few months, and when I finally got caught, it was because a friend of mine was driving. She had a license. She apparently had ran a stop sign, but I had just picked up drugs across the street. I thought the cops had seen me do that. So when they were, running her license information, I got out of the car and I booked it and I ran and I ended up picking up another charge of assault and battery on a police officer because they had to tackle me, and that was really what. That was it.
Yeah. That's it. That's like that. No, as soon as you touch a cop or even push a cop. That's it,
Well, I didn't even push them. They pushed me, but I guess any unwanted contact with a police officer is assault on a police officer.
Yeah.
Because I was running away. They didn't even know that I had a warrant, but I was paranoid. I was like, they know, they're here to get me. They saw me get drugs, all these things. So. Yeah,
that's like literally like in prison. It's the same thing with the officers. If you like do anything. If you rub up against them, that's assault on an officer. You know, and it's like they're not gonna really believe you. They're gonna put extras on it, and like, no, he did it like this when it wasn't true.
Right.
So yeah, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
So it's crazy that so much happened in such a short period of time. You were so young when all this stuff was going on. Like, that's crazy. So now, 18 years old. Like what happened after you? What happened? You just go in and say, okay, you're on your own now.
So I spent the last. I got out of juvenile detention and I was put in this really, really structured girls group home and treatment program. Essentially, we didn't have a phone, we didn't have emails, we couldn't talk to boys, we couldn't really go home. And we were forced to kind of participate in like therapy and groups and like self-help groups and stuff like that, like recovery-based groups. And what ended up happening was I started opening up to the idea of like maybe my life would be better if I wasn't on drugs and alcohol. And I started to kind of surrender to the process because my circumstances had kind of made me willing, right? Yeah. I didn't have a choice. But I stopped fighting it. Yeah. And I started to have a new experience, and I started to create real connections with girls who had been through some of the things I'd been through for the first time in my life. I really struggled to connect with other girls my age. I saw them as a threat or that I couldn't trust them, but the truth was that was like a reflection of myself, right? I was not trustworthy. I was a liar and I was cheating, right? Yeah. And so I was also surrounding myself with people who were not very great people, right? Exactly, yeah. So of course it gave me a very skewed perception of the world. And what ended up happening was I decided I wanted to like not do drugs and alcohol anymore. And I got out a month before my 18th birthday. I went to my dad's house and I was on the ankle monitor until that time, and I was continuing to be drug tested and checking in with like my caseworker and all these things. And then I got off and I kept it together for a little while, and I went to community college. I hadn't gotten my diploma, but there was a program called the Gateway to College, which was like funded by I think the Bill Gates Foundation, and I was able to take college classes while also getting high school credits to work towards an associate's degree. And I was doing that for a while, and then I got my license finally at 18 years old, and I got a car, and things started to improve a little bit. But I knew that like drugs were really dangerous for me because they had ruined my life. But I eventually, because I was 18, I was maybe 19 at this point, I started drinking again because I didn't think it was a problem. And maybe it's not for everybody, but for me, it always leads me back to heavier things. Yeah. So for me, drinking, smoking weed is playing with fire, but I didn't know that then. And it inevitably did lead me back to opiates and harder drugs.
Yeah, and that's very like self-reflective of yourself to be able to recognize that like you can't have a drink because it's going to lead to something else. And that's how you show yourself you've grown, because you're taking stock of yourself. Like you know what you can handle, what you can't. You know what people to be around. You know what roads to go down. Like you start to become aware of that. As you mature. And it's crazy because you mentioned earlier that you made a decision to stop drinking and smoking. And so like that's powerful because people always talk about the power of making a decision. Like when you just say like I'm done with this, or I'm done being in this abusive relationship, or I'm done being in this criminal lifestyle. And like you could just do that. Like, how were you able to just say I'm gonna make this decision and just stop?
Well, so I spent almost 3 years in the system, so I didn't have an opportunity, but I also knew that all of my problems were very much connected to my drug and alcohol use. Yeah. I think the problem is that for me, alcohol and drugs were doing something for me that maybe it doesn't do for everyone. It was making me feel social. It was making me feel pretty. It was making me feel happy when I was sad. It was doing something for me, and I made this decision, and I started to do some work around it, because I didn't really have a choice, right? I didn't necessarily want it at first, but I opened up to the idea. And what ended up happening is at 19 is I forgot about that decision, and I like succumbed to the urge, because to put the alcohol or the drugs in my body had a bigger benefit to me at that time than stopping, right? At 19 years old.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned reflection. I'm 30 now, right?
Yeah.
Not that I'm super old, but
Yeah.
I had 15 years
Yeah.
to really prove to myself that every time I drank, I end up on the streets smoking meth,
Right.
or
Yeah.
every time. And that's not true for everyone, but it's true for me, because I have done it not once, not twice, hundreds of times. I tell myself this time it will be different.
Yeah.
And every time it ends up exactly the same or worse. So I had to really hit my head a lot of times, and probably could have saved myself a lot of pain and destruction, had I come to this realization sooner.
Yeah. And you're so young still, 30. It's like, what can you do to keep from relapsing?
You know, this last time getting sober, so this is really the second time I've ever tried, other than when I was at 18, 19.
Yeah.
That was my first experience, and it wasn't my choice. It was kind of forced upon me. But that experience wasn't bad. Juvie wasn't fun. Court, jails, institutions, that's a nightmare, right? But ultimately, what ended up happening is I ended up finding a little bit of my sense of self. I ended up having fun sober. I ended up creating real connections with these girls, right, who had the same things in their life that I'd had. And I really believed that I was terminally unique, that I was the only one going through what I was going through. And when I met these girls, I found that just wasn't true, right? That it was a lie. It was a lie that I was using to keep myself separated from other people. And so when I got sober this last time, what happened was I had something to pull from, and that experience was positive, at least in sobriety, right? Once I opened up to the idea. And so this time around, I was willing to take suggestions from people who had had the same experiences from me and then gotten sober and have a successful life. The suggestions that seemed so silly.
Yeah.
Little things like make your bed in the morning sounded ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was like little incremental changes like that, and then also I came to the realization that everything I know, maybe it's all wrong, right? Maybe what I think is important, maybe who I think should be in my life, maybe who I think I am, maybe all of it is wrong. Maybe I don't know what's good for me. And when I came to that idea or that realization, I was willing to change everything. Everything. And for me, by the end, I was in federal prison for smuggling immigrants from Tijuana into the United States. I'd gotten into so much trouble, and I've been in trouble before. I've been to jail before. It wasn't jail that struck me sober. I've done that at least 6 times, right? I've been in and out of institutions since I was a teenager. But for whatever reason, I had this moment where I was like, something has to change or I'm gonna die this way, and I didn't want to die. And the difference is when I made this decision, I followed it up with some action. And that action looked like asking somebody who had the same experiences as me and had gotten better and changed their life, asking them for help. What do I do?
Yeah.
with everything. How do I have a relationship with my mom? I didn't talk to her for almost 15 years. I talk to her now. I have a good relationship with her. How do I have a healthy relationship with like a man? Right? How do I get a job? How do I pay my taxes? How do I find like peace and serenity? Like, how do I go to sleep at night without drugs?
Right.
Like, what time should I had to relearn how to live life, like, because I only know how to do it with drugs and alcohol. So it was like everything was different. I had to change everything.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's like you went through so much, and to even like think like, dang, now where you're at now, where are you at now? Because like your story is amazing, and all the stuff that you've been through. Like, there's so many things that could have happened along that way. It makes you not here today, you know, and that's just the stuff you've talked about. I know there's so much more in detail in that. Like now, today, who are you now, and what is your mission now? Like, what is your goals going forward?
So today, I still have to like pinch myself because sometimes I still think of myself as the person I used to be, and the truth is that I'm nothing like that, right? Today I have a career, right? I have the opportunity to work in a field where I'm helping people who have been through the same things that I've been through, right? Or struggling with drugs and alcohol or mental health or trauma. And that is just such a blessing, and it's given me so much purpose to think that all of the bad things that happen to me and all of my pain can be not only someone else's medicine, but also like a job.
Yeah, I know.
I thought everything that happened to me would make me unemployable.
Yeah.
But again, everything I think I know, like, it's just not true.
Yeah.
If anything, I can wear it like a badge of honor and use my experiences to help other people, which has been life-changing for me. It's made me feel worthy, right? And made me realize that all of the bad things that have happened in my life, all of the decisions and choices I've made have a purpose and have led me to the point that I'm at today. Today I have like, I'm very like spiritually centered, which is something when I first got sober, that's not what I was looking for, but it's a big part of my life today. I just got engaged.
Wow, congratulations.
So that's wild.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's
Do you have
crazy.
kids?
I don't.
No. You
No.
want kids?
I do want kids, and that's another thing that's changed. Everything I thought that I needed in my life, I never thought I was gonna have kids. My mom, like I said, she was sober for a long time. She's not today. She started drinking again after 25 years. Both of my parents come from like this generational trauma where like my dad comes from poverty, my mom grew up in an alcoholic home, I grew up in a dysfunctional home, and I thought I need to like end the cycle, right? And I also didn't think I was capable of being a parent, but like today, the woman I am today, I believe that I could be a good parent, which is just a testament to like the changes that have happened within me, and also like the belief that I'm a good person, right?
Yeah, that's
like,
important.
Because we beat ourselves up and we tell ourselves we're bad, or we are our choices, or nobody can love us. All of my relationships with people for so many years were so transactional. What can you give me, right? What can I get from you? Especially with like boyfriends and relationships. So like today, it's like I can look at my relationships with friends, with my fiance, with my parents, not what can you give me, but like what can I bring to our relationship? What can I do for you, right? I've reframed how I look at the world, like my perception has changed. How can I be, if I'm in a selfish state of mind where like it's me, or woe is me, or this victim mentality, or all of these things, the best way to get out of that is just to be of service to somebody else and be other-centered. So I spend a lot of my time just like showing up for other people. If I'm having a bad day, I forget about it when I'm hearing about someone else's problems. It makes it so much easier, right? Everything's changed.
Yeah, and so now, like, you know, all the stuff that you're doing, you know, what kind of message would you send out there to somebody that's going through what you went through back when you were younger?
I would say if you're in a place where you're feeling hopeless, where you think everything is lost and there's no coming back, it might feel like the worst day of your life or like everything's crashing down, but sometimes those most painful and those deepest, darkest moments end up being the best moment in your life, because that's the moment where we have the willingness to do something different. And that was true for me. Going to federal prison felt like the worst moment of my life. But if you ask me today, I'd tell you it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my entire life, because it was the trajectory of me shifting gears to change everything.
Yeah.